Okay, let's dive into this explainer and explore the absolute deepest, darkest facets of human existence and morality. We're going to tackle some massive, timeless questions today, everything from our most primal moral instincts to the deeply absurd nature of the universe we live in. We're going to confront what it really means to be human, shadows and all. To get us started, picture this chilling Jain and Buddhist allegory. Imagine a man forced to flee his home. He's wandering through a dense forest when suddenly he's being chased by a massive charging elephant. In absolute panic, he throws himself down an abandoned well, grabbing onto some roots just to break his fall. But he looks down, and at the bottom of the well there is a literal mass of snakes, complete with a giant python just waiting to swallow him whole. Up above, the angry elephant is stomping the ground, which actually dislodges a beehive. So as this man is hanging there in the gloom, totally surrounded by angry bees, with certain death above and below him, a single drop of sweet honey falls right onto his lips. And in that terrifying moment, he becomes entirely distracted by that tiny drop of sweetness, just craving more. And this ancient, wild parable perfectly tees up Section 1, the absurd human condition. So the crucial point here is that the dark side isn't just about bad behavior. It's a profound metaphor for the dark places we literally find ourselves in as humans, constantly fleeing death, yet anchored by our own ignorant failings. Think about it. Just like that man in the well, we are painfully mortal. We're surrounded by inescapable suffering. Yet instead of actually confronting our reality, we succumb to the incredible allure of distraction. We obsess over the sweet honey of our daily desires, while the elephant of time and the python of our own mortality are just sitting there, patiently waiting. Which brings us right to Section 2. Are we fundamentally good? To truly understand our dark side, we first have to ask if our fundamental nature is actually, well, good. The ancient Chinese philosopher Mencius posed this really famous thought experiment. Imagine you suddenly see a young child teetering right on the edge of a deep well, just about to fall in. Mencius argued that literally anyone seeing this would feel an involuntary, innate sense of alarm and this immediate gut-level urge to help them, not for a reward, not to get praised by your friends, but because it's simply our unlearned, totally natural response. And this brilliantly illustrates Mencius's qualified optimism. But here's the coolest part. This view is actually supported today by modern science. Yale psychologist Paul Bloom ran a series of studies, documented in his book Just Babies, showing that even infants, who definitely haven't been taught complex social rules yet, consistently prefer figures that help others over figures that hinder them. So this really strongly suggests that we are in fact born with a natural, innate moral sense. But of course, we have to look at the other side of the coin in Section 3, or are we naturally evil? Because if we all have this innate goodness, why on earth is there so much selfishness and cruelty in the world? Let's place Mencius's sunny optimism directly against his Confucian rival, Zunzi, and his deep pessimism. Zunzi famously argued that humans are inherently selfish right down to the core. Left unchecked, he believed, our natural emotions, like envy and our love for profit, will absolutely, inevitably lead to conflict. For Zunzi, goodness isn't natural at all. It requires deliberate effort and the strict artifice of education and society just to overcome our twisted, self-serving nature. Now, what's really fascinating here is Galtie's alternative theory of indifferentism. Galtie, who was actually a contemporary of Mencius, compared our moral blank slate to a weeping willow tree or flowing water. Think about it. A piece of willow wood isn't naturally a cup or a bowl, right? It has to be carved into one. Water doesn't naturally choose to flow east or west. It just goes wherever the channels direct it. So, Galtie argued that our nature is completely neutral, shaped entirely by our environment and our experiences. We can test these theories with Plato's famous story of Gyges. Glaucon tells this tale of a simple shepherd who happens to find a ring that grants him complete and total invisibility. And with the fear of punishment totally removed, this ordinary, everyday guy sneaks into the palace, seduces the queen, murders the king, and violently seizes power. The incredibly uncomfortable question this poses to us is this. If you had an invisibility ring and faced absolutely zero consequences, would your true nature succumb to those same dark temptations? If we are genuinely capable of these dark acts, we hit Section 4. What exactly is evil? Seriously, if we're going to talk about evil, we have to define what we are actually talking about.
We can look to Aristotle's ontology, which is just the study of how things exist, to figure this out. Is evil a concrete thing, like that specific shirt you're wearing? Is it an abstract universal concept, like the color blue? Or is it an accidental property, like a cat's feistiness, a characteristic that a person can just happen to possess or lack? Breaking it down like this helps us treat evil as an actual mechanical characteristic of actions or people, rather than just using it as a poetic metaphor.
Now, some people historically argued for the privation theory. This is the idea that evil isn't a thing at all. It's just the absence of good, kind of like how cold is really just the absence of heat. But honestly, this fails pretty hard when you look at the darkest human realities. Think of a sadistic killer. Their active, twisted desire to cause pain isn't just a lack of compassion, right? It is a very real, very dark property that they actively possess and act upon. And this brings us right to the mechanics of it all, in Section 5, Actions, Harm, and Disposition. Let's look at a really tough question. Is harm always necessary for something to be considered truly evil? Consider this incredibly twisted thought experiment. Imagine a hiring manager chooses a massive celebrity for a charity role. They know for a fact it's going to maximize donations and bring immense overall good to the world. But the manager only chooses this path so they can savor the profound misery and depression of the candidate they rejected. The outcome is objectively great for the charity, sure, but the internal motivation is incredibly twisted. So is the action evil, even if it technically brings about overall good? Philosopher Luke Russell actually pushes this boundary even further with a thought experiment about a passive voyeur. Imagine a person who takes intense pleasure in watching simulated suffering. Think incredibly realistic computer-generated torment. Now, this voyeur causes absolutely zero real-world harm to anyone, yet that inner state of experiencing intense pleasure at the mere sight of extreme suffering, it makes the action undeniably evil, effectively completely separating the concept of evil from the concept of harm. And this striking idea perfectly captures the dispositional model of evil personhood. True evil isn't just about the frequency of bad actions. It's not just a tally sheet of your wrongdoings. Instead, it's about being internally, strongly, and highly fixedly disposed to perform those acts. It's all about the deeply rooted character and the dark inner life of the individual, not just the external consequences of what they happen to do. Okay, pretty heavy stuff, right? But this leads us to Section 6, Finding Meaning in the Dark. Look, acknowledging our profound capacity for evil and the frequent absurdity of our existence shouldn't just leave us entirely hopeless. Actually, it's the very first step toward finding meaning. When we confront the mechanical absurdity of our daily routines, the endless cycles of commuting, working, eating, sleeping, we might really relate to Dorothy Parker's poetry here. Her words are basically a poetic flick at the ear of an indifferent universe. She asks this brutally honest question. We can try our absolute hardest to leave a mark, but on the grand cosmic scale, what difference does it truly make? Or maybe you feel the heavy emotional resonance of poet Ted Hughes's visceral reminder. He strips away all of our comfortable illusions, pointing out that death ultimately owns our hopes, our willpower, and our very muscles. It is a stark, unavoidable confrontation with our own mortality that forces us to evaluate exactly what we are doing with this brief little flash of life we've been given. The French philosopher Albert Camus explored this exact type of existential dread through the myth of Sisyphus. Punished by the gods, Sisyphus was condemned to push this massive boulder up a steep mountain for all of eternity, only to watch it endlessly roll back down right as he reached the top. It is, quite literally, the ultimate picture of seemingly meaningless, agonizing human toil. But Camus throws us a brilliant and totally unexpected curveball here. He argued that we must imagine Sisyphus as actually happy. Wait, why? Because during his descent back down the mountain, what Camus calls his hour of consciousness, Sisyphus clearly and fully recognizes his absurd suffering. In that exact moment of radical awareness, by accepting his fate without any illusions, he rebels against it. He becomes entirely superior to his fate. He is stronger than the rock. So as we wrap up this explainer on the absolute darkest aspects of our human nature, you have to ask yourself a deeply personal question. We all have our struggles, our dark impulses, and our endless daily grinds. In your moments of profound consciousness, when you recognize the absolute absurdity of it all, how will you choose to view your own boulder? Will you let it crush you, or will your awareness make you stronger than the rock?